Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm the Blundering Bishop, and welcome to another standard video. This is part of our Road to 1500 series, where we play a number of 15 plus 10 games on chess.com with the intention of getting our ELO rating to 1500 over the course of the next few months. Often we blunder our way there to victory, sometimes we lose, but we're happy as long as we get a game of chess in. If you're enjoying the content here on the Blundering Bishop, please do feel free to leave a like, hit that subscribe button. If you think there's things we could improve, please do feel free to leave a helpful comment. So let's search for an opponent. This does fall into the rapid category on chess.com, and our opponent today is Nest Orkv. He's at 1135 and he doesn't want to play us. Okay, well, we'll try that again. Must be something we said. Our opponent is Aklak41. He's 1168 rated, so we'll start with e4. See what our opponent wants to do. Okay, e5, we'll go knight f3. Opponent's taking his time to think about the opening moves here. Okay, we're going to go for the Italian game, that's bishop c4. And if bishop c5 from our opponent, that would be the Gioco Piano, but instead it's the Hungarian defence, bishop e7. So what should we do here? We can't take... well, we could just take d4, but I think we're going to push c3 first to prepare d4. Yeah, opponent just backs up their pawn on e5 there. But I think we're in a position to make that push now, so we'll do that. Or we could just castle first, get our king to safety. Yeah, I think we're going to castle. Yeah, opponent's just gone h6 there with a view to stopping our bishop doing anything outrageous once we make this move. So I think now we're going to go d4. Opening out into quite a nice position. So our opponent does choose to take there. I think we'll take back with our... do we take back with our knight or our c-pawn? I think we take back with our c-pawn. No, we want to end up with our knight there, really. So let's retake with our knight. Not sure if that's the correct way of doing things, but I'd ideally like to end up with a pawn on D and E after we retake here. That's what we do. Hope you're all having a great week in the run-up to Christmas. Got your present shopping done. I hope many of you have got a posh chess set for Christmas. I'm not sure if I have or not. I'm sure we'll find out on Christmas morning. Okay, opponent goes c6. Not really sure what that move is. I suppose it's to deny us access to the d5 square. We'll just continue to develop here. I've got quite a nice square for our bishop on f4. I could also just look to bring our other knight out to c3. Yeah, I think just a developing move here. Bishop's a bit loose on this square. I think we'll start by just bringing our knight out and contesting that d5 square further. I was reading a good review, Jay Rayner in The Guardian this week, about a restaurant on the moon, and he said it was a good restaurant, very good food, but no atmosphere at all. Right, opponent brings their bishop out. Our bishop's left hanging by this, which I'm not delighted about. I don't really want to exchange, giving them back an e-pawn, nor do I really want to be moving my bishop, so I could bring my queen up to help defend here. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. Hang on, no, if we do that and our opponent pushes their pawn, oh no, because we've got control over that square with our pawn, so I don't think that's a major problem. Let's do that. Okay, they choose to take. Interesting. So I think we'll capture back with our queen. Just looking at our opponent's setup, they're quite limited for space, but they do look very, very solid. Got the queen bishop battery set up, nice broad pawn front that denies us quite a lot of space, and now they've attacked our e4 pawn. I'm looking at rook e1 here to defend that pawn. I can't really attack the knight because of the pawn on h6. So rook e1 just defends that pawn, but it's quite passive. I mean, pushing the pawn, we end up exchanging and hitting the rook, their knight with tempo. But it does. Actually, yeah, I quite like that push. I think we're going to do it. Our opponent doesn't have access to the e4 square because of our knight. I suppose they've got the option though, after we push, of advancing their pawn there. Yeah, I don't. If they choose to take, it also opens their queen up to attacking our d4 pawn. So I think we'll just go rook e1 here. Okay, opponent castles to safety, or relative safety. Obviously, they've got a little opening there for us, but without our light square bishop, that's going to be pretty difficult for us to exploit. Still looking at this move. I don't think e5 is going to work for us, because pawn takes. They've either got the choice of pushing here, and then our queen is having to retreat, which I'm not particularly keen on. So I think we just need to develop our bishop here, perhaps to f4. I mean, it is a bit of a loose square, really. But it's a nice diagonal if they do move that pawn. It's not any immediate risk of capture. Their dark square bishop is looking pretty sad on e7, so I think we'll give it a go. Not wild about their rook their knight having access to g4 either. Okay, so they go the other way. Bring their their pawn to b5. Sorry. I wonder if we just retreat our queen here, either back to d3 or back to b3 to keep them on that diagonal. I think if we go b3, we've got a bit more threat along pointing at their king. Whereas if we tuck into d3, it's a nice compact position for us, but our queen is potentially less threatening there. Well, I think we'll go back to b3, because then we've always got the option of tucking in behind our d4 pawn later. We really need to come up with a plan though. We're just reacting to our opponent's move, so let's stop and have a quick look. Our opponent's position is quite solid. They're denying us a lot of space with the way their pawn structure is set up, and I feel like we need to try and crack that. I'm wondering about a4 here. B takes a4, queen takes a4, and then that's putting pressure on the c6 pawn, which is loose, hitting the bishop, hitting the rook with tempo. I think that looks quite good. What if they choose just to push, with a view to then going maybe c5, c4? I don't think I'm as worried about that, because the second they go c5, I've got the option to take. This pawn isn't under threat really from the knight, because they'd lose their knight in that circumstance. So yeah, I think we will go a4. Just got to take back a bit of control of this queen side of the board really. And I've still got my eye at some point on this e5 square as our potential to sort of break our opponent's position open. See whether our opponent wants to take here. No, they do push, as we said, hitting on knight. Yeah. So we've got to move the knight. There's no particularly attractive squares to move it to, really. I think we should have thought of that a little bit harder before we committed to this, because if we go, turn those dots off for you. If we go knight e2, we're going to lose the pawn here on e5. If we push e5, takes. Okay, so now might be the time actually. Yeah. So push e5. If they take, and then we're hitting that knight, and they'll have to move. Are we down a piece though in that exchange, aren't we? We're down a piece, but is that a good sacrifice? Yeah, let's do it. I don't think it is in hindsight. Actually, I've just this minute thought about what a terrible plan that is. We are definitely down a piece now, and our compensation is a pawn, so our opponent's going to be +2 at the end of this line. I knew that. I even said it out loud, and then I still made the move. Yeah, that was not smart. So I think our opponent will take on c3 here, and that will eventually lead to the loss of our knight, and their knight will escape, which is quite disappointing. Could we mix things up though? Okay, so our opponent just jumps their knight into d5. Didn't think about that move, to be honest. Why have they done that? So if we take now, that doubles their pawns. It gets rid of their knight, which is potentially dangerous, and doubles their pawns on the d-file. Takes our knight out of danger, and leaves us with our pawn nicely set on e5, and then we could choose to take afterwards. Seems like an interesting move. And in fact, could we not just end up a pawn there and hitting the rook? Is there anything from our opponent when we make that move? There's no checks, no discoveries. Yeah, I think we're just going to take. That was an odd move from our opponent. I'll be checking that one afterwards to see if that was a blunder. Yeah, one thing I have noticed at our rating level is a tendency from our opponents to use very little of their allotted time, and I'm not sure if that's because we use too much time because I'm talking and my calculation is quite poor, or if that's just because our opponents tend to rush their play. I don't know. I think by and large, though, I have noticed that we tend to end up 13 or 14 minutes behind our opponent by the end of the game if we don't time out altogether. Right, at least our opponent's taking a bit of time to think about this one. So I was thinking for our next dad joke that chartered surveyor, I might tell you a construction joke, but unfortunately I'm still working on it. So I hope you enjoyed that one. As again, they'll always be pegged in the description for those of you who only tune in for the gags. Right, so our opponent retakes on d5. Do we just take with our queen here? I think we've got to, haven't we? We're up a pawn out of that exchange. Our position is good. Hit the rook with... Well, we don't really hit the rook with a gain of tempo, do we? Because we're not actually going to take it with our queen. But if we take, let's say, what's our opponent going to do? I mean, they could go b3, but that doesn't get them anywhere. They could take on e5, but we'll just capture back, either with our bishop or probably with our d-pawn, to be honest, to keep it protected by the bishop and the rook. And then we've got some options, so I can't see any danger, and I think that's what we're going to do. Yeah, so we are up a pawn now, not because of a wonderful piece of tactical brilliance on our part, but I think largely because of our opponent making that knight move. Right, so they do capture. I think we'll... no, we can't, of course, capture back with our pawn, because then we lose our queen. So do we want to just get the queens off the board here? So if we take, they have to take with their rook, and then we take their pawn. I mean, up a pawn at the end of the line. These pawns are locked up. These pawns are equal. Both got a dark square bishop and 2 rooks going into the endgame. Feels like it could end up a draw. If we've got nothing better though, yeah, let's trade the queens off. And then we'll take here. No, we don't want... we want to keep our pawn passed, actually, so I think we'll take with the bishop with a view to using this pawn. We'll get a rook behind it, and try to use that pawn to pass and promote. So I think, you know, this simplification was an interesting choice, but I think as we're likely to end up with this pawn probably passed, we'll see how it goes after we take here. I think it was a good choice to simplify. So we have to take, and we'll take with our bishop here. Hang on though, if we take with our bishop, and then they go, yeah, and then they go f6, and then we have to retreat our bishop, and then they take the pawn. So we don't want to do that. We are actually going to have to take with the pawn, because we can't get our rook behind that pawn in time, which is a bit of a shame. If we just push it, nothing good happens, and we lose our bishop. Bishop takes f3, yeah, and then we're losing the pawn. So I think we've got to take with the pawn, unfortunately. So it isn't quite passed. We have got a pawn on an adjacent file, but we do have a real opportunity to convert this now. And I wonder if, see what our opponent wants to do, but I wonder if we push e6 now. Our opponent's got to take at that point. Otherwise we're forking their rooks, threatening to promote, and if they do, I think we're just winning another pawn. Now this, they're obviously trying to threaten this f2 square, but as it stands they don't have anything to support that with. So we could either look to lock things up here and get our pawns talking, but I think pushing here really does help to convert our advantage. Yeah, I think that's what we've got to do. Exposes their king as well. Now if our opponent... so our opponent can't go... yeah, but they could now go to... could now go to d4 with their bishop, attacking the b2 pawn, so we'll have to go rook a b2 afterwards. Okay, so let's take that pawn. So we're getting into the end game now. Up a pawn, I think it's a great place to be, but this is still quite a tricky position. Oh. Right, I say up a pawn. I've just blundered our bishop, so... welcome to the life of the blundering bishop. That was particularly foolish of me. I can't believe I did that. So if you want to see how to take it from winning to losing, all you need to do is watch the blundering bishop, because we specialise in that here. From winning to losing in one blunder. How on earth do we come back from that? Well, let's see. Right, not a great deal we can do now, I think, in this end game. You know, we were doing quite well, now we're not. I think we'll start by putting the threat on that bishop, see if our opponent wants to make a mistake. Oh god, every single game we're guaranteed a foolish blunder. Opponent just moves in to check our king. We'll have to go back to the corner. It's definitely one of the more frustrating parts of our game, because no matter how much time I put in, calculation training, visualization training, we still, twice a game at least, make these appallingly bad blunders, and there doesn't seem to be any improvement in our number of blunders per game. But we shall keep trying. Don't be downhearted. We will keep going. Okay, our opponent's pressing in for a mate here. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can do so at the other end. I think if we go rook c8 check, they will then go king h8, king h7. No way to convert that because of our position. Yeah, losing that bishop just lost us the game. Unfortunately, there's really very little left we could do. I mean, if we advance our pawn here, we've got a get out for our king, but not a good one because of the presence of their bishop. So we'll give a derisory check. Just see if our opponent is willing to blunder mate. I hope they are, but I'm not especially hopeful that they are. So not seeing the sort of threat that was coming from the rook and the bishop there is just too much tunnel vision. So we had our plan: win that pawn, win a second pawn, which we thought would bring us out ahead. And in actuality, I was so focused on that plan that we ended up in this position where we blundered a lead and managed to turn it into a losing game. Which is unfortunate, but is very much the way of chess, I'm afraid. So it does happen. Let's just do that. It gives us a bit of a get out, but I think we're at best 1 move, 2 moves, 3 moves from checkmate here. I don't like to resign in these positions. I think the problem is lots of us do resign, and we never end up getting practice in how, particularly at this end of the rating spectrum, never managed to get to executing these checkmates, and it's actually quite an important part of the game, really, to be able to do it. So looking now, if our opponent moves there, we don't actually have any way to mate ourselves that I can see. I mean, if we could get our pawn up into that square, that would be fine, but I don't think we can. If we drop our rook in here, it just gets taken. Do we just take their rook now, though? So what happens if we do take... Oh, yeah, hang on. They can't mate us now, can they? Because they've only got 1 rook. I mean, they can take that pawn and probably pass. But that didn't look like the right move for our opponent there. So if they bring their rook down, we'll just go king g2, and then they're going to struggle to box our king in after that, aren't they? Yeah, they do take that pawn, so they've got a dangerous looking passer there now. But have we got the opportunity to finish them off? Let's just think. We push, they push, we push. They have to take, we take, then we've got their king boxed in. Ah, but hang on, because they've got their bishop there as well. So if they do move their bishop, then we've got a problem. Okay. Well, let's push up once anyway. And then we shall see what our opponent is thinking. I think for them, if they start pushing their pawn, okay, so they do just get in front of it. It's probably sensible, because now they can push with something like impunity here. This pawn is useless. I think if we just get our rook behind their passer here, they'll have to do the same. Doesn't blunder the piece at all, and then it's going to be about activating the king, really. See if we can get him somewhere to get into the action. I mean, it's still a difficult position for us, but it's made somewhat better following our opponent's blunder there. Right, what do we do? So now we're in a position to threaten their king, because this is mate in 1, isn't it? If they don't recognise it. So if we can get our rook into h8, that is mate. So they're going to have to move this pawn if they want to stay alive, I think. But actually, if they advance that pawn, then rook b7 is mate, I think. What about... yeah, they can't threaten the rook on e8. Okay, so they've cleared that pawn out the way, but actually isn't rook b7 just mate now? No, because rook b7, they'd have to go bishop e7. The king's got nowhere to run, so I think it's mate after that, isn't it? There's nothing to stop it. They can get their bishop to here, but we'll take it the next turn, the next move, and then there's no way out. Yeah, I think that is a rook. Double rook mate there. I'm sure it's got a name that you'll tell me in the comments down below. So that square is out for the king. What about the bishop coming back here? That's not instantly losing for our opponent, is it? But it is losing for our opponent, because then pawn f6, no choice but to take it with their... well, they can't even take it with their bishop, in fact. And then when we go there, then we're promoting. So I think we're just winning. I don't think there's any way out of this for our opponent. Only 2 legal moves here. Bishop g7 and bishop e7. Bishop e7 is mate in 1. Bishop g7. Then pawn f6. Then our opponent has a get out here. We take the bishop. They can't recapture with their king, and then we're picking up a queen next turn. Is that right? Bishop g7, pawn f6. They could go king g6, they could go b3, they could go g4. Those are all options. They could also check. Could they perpetually check our king? No, because we've got a number of escapes towards the centre of the board. So I think we'd be okay there. And then next turn we're promoting, and I think that's just the end for our opponent. 2 rooks and a queen against a rook and a bishop. I mean, the b pawn is threatening, but the second they move that rook, they're going to struggle to promote it because their a pawn is stuck behind our a pawn. So I think we might have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory and victory from the jaws of defeat. So quite a good one for us. Opponent's taking some time to think, but I'm not sure they can think their way out of this one. I think we're just winning. So while they take their time to think, had a note from my uncle the other day. He's just named his dogs. He's called them Rolex and Timex. They're his watchdogs. Always been a dream of mine to own a genuine Rolex. I think unfortunately I'm going to have to settle for a Timex, unless one of you out there is feeling particularly generous. I've got very little ladylike wrists, but if you do happen across a spare Rolex diving watch, please feel free to send it over to the Blundering Bishop. Would really appreciate it. Okay, this is quite a think by our opponent, given that they've only got 2 legal moves left. I tend to think the best of people, so I hope our opponent hasn't just gone off to make a cup of tea whilst leaving us on the other end of the clock, because that would be very poor form. As I say, I do like to play these out to the end, so I don't at all blame our opponent for not resigning. I think it's important that when you're in a game, as you saw earlier, in fact, when you're in a game, that you do take the time to play it out as a courtesy to your opponent, and I hope that that's what our opponent is doing, rather than the other way of just leaving the clock running. But you know, with only 2 moves, the only one that keeps them in the game is Bishop g7, and it doesn't keep them in the game for that long. So I think that's the move they've got to make, isn't it? Right, they've now disconnected. Again, I'm going to hope that that's a genuine disconnection and not a rage quit from our opponent. Let's just give them their 2 minutes and see what happens. It is a bit unfortunate if that's what they've chosen to do. Okay, our opponent abandoned the game. That is poor form. That's 2 of those we've had in the last 2 weeks. It is a bit of a problem on chess.com. We'll give our opponent a thumbs down for poor form, and they've been warned for abandoning the game by chess.com. Okay, well, one player was winning, then blundered it all away. The story of our life. Let's click over to the report and have a look at how badly we blundered. So the initial report said 4 blunders. That's a lot even for the Blundering Bishop. So perhaps we didn't play this game as well as we could. So we were ahead most of the way through. This is our blunder, where we probably blundered away our bishop, and then our opponent blundered it straight back. So actually, although we didn't play with particular accuracy, we made a lot of weaker moves. It said we've only got 1 blunder and 1 missed win, whereas opponent 4 blunders. Lower accuracy than I would have liked, but let's have a look through the analysis. So Italian game, and then the Hungarian defence for our opponent. I went c3 first with a view to going d5. Computer says go straight for d4. That's fair enough. I was happy with our move. We castled where the computer was looking for us to set up our battery, which is fine, but I think the castling was a perfectly good move. Yeah, I did wonder about this move. It didn't look particularly good, and our opponent could have got their knight developed. Then they've got d4 as an inaccuracy because again the computer's pushing us to set up our battery here. But you know, taking this centre as we did, I don't think was too bad. We took with our knight. I guess, you know, once the engine gets a move on its mind, it can't stop, can it? Opponent takes back, and then we took. Now I wondered, just not there, but here. No, sorry, next move, whether this was the right move, as in e5. Well, it's encouraging us to play e5, which we did, but I think we played it somewhat later, after we got our queen back. There, we played it there, and it was the best move. Okay, I calculated this losing a piece for us, so I obviously calculated it wrong. As it happened, our opponent played knight d5, which the computer has as an accuracy. So how would the line actually have gone if the computer had its way? So d takes e5, d takes e5, and then, yeah, b takes c3, we take the knight. And, yeah, okay, so very open position down the middle there, if the engine had had its way. Okay. So they're seeing that as an inaccuracy. The trade of queens was best. Good. I'm glad about that, because I thought about that one for a while. And then we took that way up, and I think that was the right way to go. And then when we pushed e6, that was a mistake. Okay. Why was that a mistake? Okay, so they wanted us to put some threat on that bishop, and this is where we blundered our bishop. Should have seen this revealed attack there. We didn't. That's the blunder, and from here we were behind. That was seen as an accuracy by our opponent, but then when we tried to push, and obviously giving that check was desperation. I am chronic for this. I tend just to start throwing pieces around when I'm behind, particularly after a blunder. Real lesson is just to keep your head and keep playing. This was the move where our opponent gave the advantage back to us. Big old blunder there. Allowed us to take their rook. They took the pawn there, which I don't think was a good move, and then bringing the bishop back there, well, that was the beginning of the end for our opponent, really. There's a missed win here. We'll try that one just over on the retry board in a second. And then from here, our opponent only had bishop g7 as the move. Yeah, that's absolutely right, because then we'd have been promoting after some checks. Our opponent run out of checks, we'll promote, and then that's the end of the game, really. No way for our opponent to come back. So let's have a quick look at that missed win. So we went rook b8 here in order to threaten that pawn. So what's the missed win? Let's have a think. So if we put our rook on c7, that allows us then to take the bishop there with impunity, or just push our pawn. So I think rook c7 pins that pawn to the king, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. That's a blunder, in fact. Okay. Do we just take it and then we lose? Is it a rook sacrifice, or certainly an exchange sacrifice, in order to pass our pawn? No. Okay, you tell me, computer, because I haven't got a clue. Because that's mate now, isn't it? So there it goes. They go a few checks from them, but ultimately we're mating the king after that, aren't we? Okay, well, there you have it. Keep playing, folks, because no matter how many times you blunder at this level, your opponent might just drop you a blunder that helps you win later on. Bit disappointed that our opponent abandoned the game when they were behind, but understandable. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, as ever, here on the channel. If you're enjoying the content, please feel free to leave a like. If you're not enjoying the content, if it's too painful to watch, please feel free to leave a helpful comment on how we can improve matters. Thank you very much for watching, and good evening.